there was many yards, the backs of the houses, where they had pigsties, and they also had an area for boiling the slops, the food for the pigs. And they'd light a big fire with sawdust shavings that they got from local woodworking places. But and as kids, we would be in the yards with the fires lighting, getting a bit of a heat and having a bit of a laugh. But all the slops that the neighbours would give in, you know, the leftovers from whatever they were eating, would be boiled up in these big churns or whatever they were.
It's great to be back with another podcast, and welcome back, everyone. Really interesting show lined up for you. Deirdre, some might say that the Dubs think milk comes straight from a supermarket shelf.
However, Cathal, chatting with Mary Kennedy and Mick Denver, two Dublin City locals, who tell us all about farming goings-on in the 50s, smack bang in the middle of Dublin.
Really opened up our minds, I suppose, from heating up pig slops to milk being produced in Brown Thomas, sitting alongside the handbags, TB and the big Tolka floods of 1954. I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glenn,
your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors, and you're welcome back for another Environment Edge podcast number 72, and here we go.
So Mick and Mary, you're extremely welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Mick, we've been chatting here in your kitchen for the last couple of minutes, and we've been talking about your childhood experiences. Could you tell us a little bit about where you're from and your connection to this area? So we're here in Dublin at the moment.
Right. Well, my name is Mick Denver. I was born in Spring Garden Street, Ballybock, Dublin, in 1945. And I lived in number 46, Spring Garden Street. And it was a lovely street, great neighbours, and loads to do for the children. We weren't well off or anything. It was a poor times. But people made the best of what they had. And a lot of people kept livestock. Like they would have had pigs, and some had a horse, some had a cow, some had chickens, and there was others who didn't have any livestock at all, but they had fairly good jobs. Like a couple of the men on the street worked in Guinness, which was a fantastic job because they had medical facilities free from Guinness. The doctor would come down and attend to them if they were sick. Now, if we step on my street, Spring Garden Street, there was many yards, the backs of the houses, where they had pigsties, and they also had an area for boiling the slops, the food for the pigs. And they'd light a big fire with sawdust shavings that they got from local woodworking places. But and as kids, we would be in the yards with the fires lighting, getting a bit of a heat and having a bit of a laugh. But all the slops that the neighbours would give in, you know, the leftovers from whatever they were eating, would be boiled up in these big churns or whatever they were.
So everybody was feeding the pigs, Mick?
Everybody was feeding the pigs, exactly. You know, I knew all the men. As kids, we would know them by their names, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Cheney, or Mr. Riley. And we could go ramble in and out of the yards if we wanted. And there was hens, plenty of hens, and they'd be running around the place. And we also played around the back lanes. We'd hoop around with our hoops, you know, that's it, a wheel off a bicycle with no spokes, and we'd run around, the gangs of us running around with a bit of stick, and that was our toy, really. But, and then there was another man, he lived next door to me, Petey Lennon was his name, and he used to train trotting horses. Now, his yard went out into Ballybock Lane. But he would be in Spring Garden Street. You'd see him, as we kids, we used to watch. And he'd have the horse on, like, what would you say, long reins of rope. And he'd walk the horse up the avenue and have it stepping out. and he'd be tipping it with the ropes, because we'd be sitting there, kids, we didn't realise what he was doing. He was training them some way or other. And he'd go up the street and then he'd turn her around or bring her back. And this was done fairly often now. So he was into sort of training horses for trotting, more or less, as far as it. And he also had a sort of a stud, because he had a stallion out the back, and fellas used to bring horses to be covered, you know. And that was interesting, because we didn't know what was going on. But
had a good idea, Ben.
we didn't really. We were very innocent, very innocent. But in my own backyard, in my house, there was the back of us was a dirty yard, and the entrance of that would have been in the next avenue, which was Ballybuck Lane. But from our yard, we could open a half door, like you see in the country now, well, as it used to be, and we'd look into a sty full of pigs, and they'd be running around the place squealing and roaring and all. And sometimes as kids, we would climb over the half door, get in, and walk down through the sty and into the dirty yard. Now, if they seen you, the men seen you, they'd say, get out, you know, the usual. Kids messing. But in the dirty yard from Ballybuck Lane, there was a lot of cattle in stalls.
Yeah.
They were stalled like. And Mr. Walsh owned that. And he would sell the milk, I'm sure, to who, I don't know. But he did go around on his bicycle. I had seen him as a kid, and this is going way back. And he would have a small churn on the handlebars. Mm-hmm. And the women would come out with a jug, and he'd ladle out a certain amount of milk, probably a pint or a half pint, I don't know. Charge-wise, I've no idea. And why they bought it, I don't know, because there would have been milk available in the shops. Because I know that for a fact, because as kids we used to collect the empty bottles for the shops, put them into the crates, and we'd be pushing. They were steel crates, and we were so small we had to push them on the ground and bring them down to the shops on Ballybuck, like Brian Thomas, and you get a bar or something, or maybe a penny
brilliant.
for collecting the bottles.
Yeah.
But on the corner of Ballybuck Lane, there was a dairy, a shop called the Dairy, and that was Martin's shop. And they sold like cheese, all dairy products, and I'm sure other stuff as well. But not so much, would you say, like vegetables like cabbage or potatoes, not so much that, because on the other corner, there was another shop called Paddy Rogers. And Paddy Rogers had lots of potatoes and cabbage and all to that, and they would be all brought in from North County Dublin.
Wow, okay.
And that's where the farms were, out in North County Dublin. Well, at the time you could say Coolock, Artane. It was around there before it was built up.
Mick, do you think, was there any influence, so you were living here in the city.
Yes.
Was there any influence by people migrating from the country back in the day? Did that influence how you kept the pigs, the geese, the dairy? Or was that inherent here already? Was that practice that you were already doing all the time?
Yeah, well, as I say, my family, we went into it as such, but the other families would have been doing it all the time there. It was just something that was there. There was, actually, when I think of it, I don't ever remember country people.
Right, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
now they could have been there, and as kids we didn't realise, but they were always Dublin people. And the country people that we would call would be North County Dublin, like Artane, which is only a couple of miles up the road,
Right,
you know.
okay, yeah.
And they would bring in their produce into the city, into the shops, like Summer's shop, Paddy Rogers' shop, Brian Thomas, any of them. And that's mostly where they got the veg and stuff from.
It sounds like you had a very, very healthy, good diet around the time.
Well,
home produced.
I was very lucky. We were very lucky in our house, because our neighbours facing Riley's, Mr. Riley worked in the market in Dublin City. He was a driver, and he would often get produce and bring it home, right? And he would share with the neighbours. You could get a couple of heads of cabbage, a few potatoes and that sort of thing. And also my grandfather had some land out in Artane. And he grew vegetables, all sorts. Turnips, potatoes, nothing exotic, nothing that we have now, carrots and things, and tomatoes. He had 2 glass houses.
Wow.
And he would grow tomatoes. And of course, they would be brought down to us. My uncles would bring them down to my mother. That was my mother's father, now I'm talking about. Bill Richards was his name. And like that, the neighbours would get a bit of whatever was going. It was people would share, very much so share.
I think I get the impression that everybody, it was a real community.
Absolutely.
Great community spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
You're talking about cattle and stalls.
Yes.
Here. We walked over here a few minutes ago, and it's hard to believe there are so many animals and bits and pieces around here. Is it much more built up now, or is it kind of the same, and was the animals shoved into different places? Or
Well, the time came in the city. Now, I don't know exactly the year, but the Count Corporation at the time said no more animals in the city because it was being populated more so, and they decided that it was best to get all the animals out of the city. But prior to that, I think there was a lot of trouble around. There was the swine flu, and I remember that well, the swine flu. So all the animals had to be destroyed, all the pigs. And I remember standing there, and the men would go into the yards, and they had some sort of guns. I don't know whether it was a spike in it, but you could hear the bang. And then they had a truck with creels on it, and they would toss the pigs up into that, and we were watching them. As they killed them, they throw them out into the truck and take all the dead pigs away.
It's hard.
So that was the swine flu, and that was very hard on the people that had read them because they depended on that money.
Yeah, of course.
and no insurance that time.
Nothing.
That was in the 50s, was it?
That would have been in the 50s, yeah. And there was nothing from the state as far as I know, compensation or anything like that. I don't think they got anything. But there was things like that, and I think after that sort of thing, the corporation probably said, look, we've got to get rid of all these...
Right, okay.
There was horses and donkeys and things like that. You'd always see them around the city, loads of them, and the coal men with the flat truck and the horse pulling it and delivering the coal. Jack Brady, of course, a neighbour, he was the coal man. And... there was all sorts of things. Everything was animal-wise,
Yeah.
Some people had a goat, which would have been fantastic, I'm sure. But in Ballybock Lane was a very interesting lane. That's where the dairy yard of Walsh's were. And also there was a turf depot.
Oh.
And at this time of the year, we say the winter time, there'd be masses of people there. You got a docket for sixpence from I don't know, they got the post office or whatever. And fellas would come, and they'd have all sorts of hand carts, homemade hand carts and things, really knocked up sort of out with pram wheels and old prams, and they'd load up. But you had to queue up with your sack. And you gave the docket to the guy, a huge amount of turf now.
Yeah.
And they'd weigh it and tip it into your sack, and they'd be pushing them along. Come on, hurry up there now and get moving. People waiting. And they'd fill up the sacks, probably 100 weight sacks. And the fellas would put them into the carts. And you could hire a guy to bring turf to your house if you had no transport. But he'd be pushing it on a hand cart. And spring cars, they'd be full of fellas going up and down like a highway with hand carts going around to the turf depot in Ballybock.
Brilliant.
But the turf was destroyed because we used to play in around the course when they'd be loading the turf. And then there was often trouble there too. Fellas would have bags all stacked up ready to load onto their hand cart, and other fellas would be robbing the sod of turf off it and trying to make up a bag for themselves,
What?
and they could sell it.
Nothing's changed, Mick.
Nothing has changed. It's the very same.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. But down the end of Ballybock Lane, there was a farm, 2 houses. There was Walsh's dairy yard, and then there was a house after that. And that was O'Mara's. John O'Mara was that man's name. I knew him because he was a friend of my uncle's. And next to him there was a house belonged to McGrath's, and Jack McGrath was the son of the house. Now, he was an old guy. To me, he was an old guy. And he had an old hand cart, and he would go around and people would say, "Well, Jack, will you move that a chair or something, or, you know, anything you wanted moved around the place, Jack would do it for you." All sorts of handy little jobs. But I remember as a kid, on a fella's shoulders, that's how small it was, and he brought me down into McGrath's house. And I'll never forget it, because they had no wooden floors. It was clay floors, you know.
Yeah.
Like you'd see in an old country cottage.
Yeah.
And then they brought me out to the back, and they had a mule in there. Now, I'm sure he must have hitched it up to something at some stage or other.
Right.
And that was McGrath's. I remember everybody was very poor now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there was no big money around.
No.
And happy.
Yes,
Happy
I think
out,
so
happy
too.
out.
Everyone was happier then.
Yeah.
I think.
Did you see any cows being milked around here, or did the milk come in from outside?
No, in the dairy yard, in Walter's dairy yard down Ballybock Lane.
To be hand milking them?
Oh yeah, they're meant to be hand milking them there. Yeah, you'd see them there, and then they'd go into the churns and whatever. Now I don't know where they sold them to. Must have sold them to the local dairy. Well, the local dairy, as far as I remember, would have been Merville Dairy up in Finglas. And that's where they must have been bringing the milk, to the Merville Dairy. Then there was the Premier Dairy, that sort of thing. But I do remember when you got a bottle of milk, there was a lot of cream on the top. A whole lot of cream, maybe 2 inches of cream, because in the house, your blood don't have you by the throat. You were trying to swill back the cream, you know.
White over cream was like that when we were kids as well. We used to drink milk straight out of the tank, unpasteurised. It tastes completely different than the milk you buy in the shop now.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, there was always the chance of TB.
Yeah.
And TB was fairly prevalent.
It was, that's right, in the 50s and the 40s.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And there was sanatoriums and all that sort of thing. You'd have to go to Peamount, and there was a place up on Whitworth Road. And that was another sanatorium. And I remember going up there with my mother, walking past, and all the beds were out.
Outside, that's right.
Outside, like just under a bit of a canopy, and you'd see them all in the beds.
In the air,
Yeah, getting the air.
But TB was that was massive. It's not like now where you go up to the hospital and you're treated. There's not much around now, but like you were isolated for a long time, weren't you?
Absolutely.
As a child, even.
I knew a fella had TB when he was young, and he told me he was in bed for a year.
That's right.
He never got out of it. And he said when he was released out of it, they had to teach him how to walk again.
Yeah.
So it was fair. Now, you'd see guys standing around, men standing around. When we were kids, we used to look at them with fascination. And one or two of them would have white scarves around their neck, or maybe they got them for nothing, I don't know. And they didn't look the best. They didn't look very healthy.
No.
I have to say, they spent a lot of time spitting.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people did spit then.
Yes.
Was that snuff or something, or was it, or tobacco?
No, that would be the TB.
Oh, for TB?
Yes, and they would be coughing up and spitting on the ground, which at those times wasn't sort of, it's a serious thing now. People don't like that sort of thing, but them times it was just part of the day. And I knew families that had TB in them, you know, and they'd be isolated.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we had public houses too, you know, and there'd be fantastic carry on in there. They'd be dancing and everything. Never, not real. I had seen fellas standing outside Roach's pub on the corner of Courtney Place. That's on Ballybock as well. That's just another street down from us. And there'd be a bit of a boxing match.
Mick, could I take you back to the 50s? All around this area in the 50s, in December 1954, there were massive floods. Now, Cathal and I are working on water quality.
Right.
So we've fierce interest in water and all things water.
Right.
So there was there was torrential rain for a couple of days in the December of 54. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Well, really, I didn't realise at the time what happened. I was only a kid. He was 54. I was only 9 or 8. But the bridge fell into the Tolka River. the railway bridge, overhead railway bridge, was undermined by the rains and fell into the Tolka River and blocked the river.
It's like a dam.
It was like a dam.
Yeah.
And it all overflowed. And of course, around here is a big dip. It's a great dip. And it flooded. Of course, it filled up with water. But in the street I lived in, the water was a bit of a hill up into it from both ends.
You got away with
And
it.
we got away with it. We were very lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
Ivory Tower.
Yes, exactly. And of course, as kids, we were delighted.
Yeah.
You know, this was great. Couldn't believe it that morning. I heard a neighbour shouting, "Get up, get up." And I looked out the window and it was Mr. Corley was his name. He lived in the Spring Garden Passage. And he said, he was shouting, "The place is flooded." So we jumped up, of course, and both ends, Spring Garden Street ends, North Strand, Ballybock, water flowing down like a river.
Really?
Right. We thought it was great.
Traditionally, I think it was only about a foot deep, but it happened at like 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning.
Yes.
Everybody was asleep in
That's
the
right,
area.
we're all asleep.
All in your beds, single-storey houses completely submerged.
That's right, yes.
And the lucky devils that were living in 2-storey houses that were upstairs, a lot of them slept through it and
We
woke
did,
up to
yes,
it.
exactly. They woke up to it. And
Yeah.
some people that were in single stories, I hear stories of people putting their hand out of the bed and what's that? Water! Get up quick! Water! But, and then of course there was houses with basements,
Yes.
especially on Ballybock. There was a lot of big houses on Ballybock that had basements. They were all flooded completely.
Yeah.
You know, now the house we're in now on North Strand Road, it was flooded in where we're sitting now up to 3 or 4 feet.
Oh, wow.
So well, you put your hand across the wall to here, they were flooded, and
Destroy the place. Yeah.
it never dried.
Okay, that's
Never,
fascinating.
it's still damp there.
And was there great community spirit around that time and trying to save people, clean up?
Yeah, well, on Ballybock, we would shop on the corner of Ballybock, Spring Garden Street. There was a shop called Lily Fairclose. They sold bread and stuff like that. But if you wanted to get something else, you had to go down further to Ballybock. Brian Thomas, Andy Thomas and all them. But your mother would say, go down to Andy Thomas and get such and such. And we get down to the end of Spring Garden Street. There was men there with Wellingtons and say, get on me back. And they'd carry you on their back down to the shop. That sort of thing. And in the avenue on North Strand, say Bridget's Avenue, and other avenues, there was boats taking people out of their houses. They were badly flooded now, you know.
Yeah.
And actually, at the end of St. Bridget's Avenue, which is just beside us here, there's a little plaque on the wall, and of a little bust of Our Lady in Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You know, after the flood that they were on. No one actually died. I think one woman died afterwards.
Yes.
But no one was drowned or anything like that.
Mary, you told us earlier on about a story down where you are now. You weren't as lucky as regards being up on a height, about some animals locked up during the flood.
It wasn't me, it was a recording I did of some people in East Wall, and they had a dairy, but they had cattle out the back, and the backyard was on 2 different levels, so they had the cattle on both levels, but they were shackled around the neck with metal, some sort of metal neck
Chains.
collar.
Yeah.
Even when we had cows years ago, you milked them and you let them back into, they'd all go back into their own position, and you just put a chain around their neck so they wouldn't.
Must have been the
Yeah,
same.
something similar,
Yeah.
so they'd be tied up overnight, yeah.
And this guy was telling me that their family, it was relations that owned this dairy, they lost half of the cattle. But the father tried to get out to rescue the ones in the lower level and couldn't get to them.
Yeah.
And they couldn't move. So they said it was awful, you know, it was really
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The upper ones, I think, survived. There's actually photographs of cattle. There's one definitely of a dead cow floating in the water. So there's a lot of animals, Mick, wasn't there? Dogs and...
Yeah, things like that. But we
went
didn't
around,
really
yeah.
see the gruesome end of it, because initially we couldn't get out of the street. You know, like I say, you'd have to get a person would carry you down to the shop and bring it back. But later, when the water subsided, well, of course, we as kids, we were on the rampage, and the military were called in, and they set up kitchens, you know, to feed the people. And the fact that we weren't actually in the flood, you know, we thought that would sort of knock us out for getting the free food. They had a canteen set up on the corner of Northbrook Avenue, under the railway bridge. And we marched in there, a good few of us, you know, young fellas, as I say, we were only 8 or 9. And I remember the soldier saying, what's the story, lads? And we said, well, we come for something, you know.
Yeah.
And they had beautiful things that we'd never seen before. Big jars of apricot jam and all that sort of thing. We thought we'd never get our hands on it.
Yeah.
And of course, the soldiers were laughing, and we were told we were bluffing them.
Yeah.
You know, we get free food. And they fed us there. Not that we needed feeding, because our own mother was feeding us anyway. But you know, with kids and getting jam.
You chanced your arm.
We chanced our arm.
Dead right.
But we done well out of that. The soldiers were very good. They helped a lot of people. And then a lot of the houses, everything had to be thrown out onto the street.
Yeah.
And of course, we were going around rummaging
Of course.
to see what's in all that old rubbish and old bits of things. And
Treasures.
It was a treasure hunt. So it was a great adventure for us. But it was devastating for people that were flooded.
Yeah.
Horrible, horrible thing. I mean, the place has never dried out for years. It's not like now they have dehumidifiers and such. But them times, and to be stinking as well, you know.
No insurance.
No insurance.
No.
Even today, they're very reluctant to insure you. But it was a terrible time, really, but we didn't realise how bad it was.
I was watching a video in preparation for coming here today, and they were saying that the bridge that was there at the time wasn't really fit for purpose, and they replaced it then with what was called a Bailey Bridge.
That's right.
Which was the same bridge that the Allies used crossing the Rhine
That's
in World War
correct.
II.
Temporary bridges, yes.
Yes, yeah.
But they have since now with a fantastic bridge on it now.
Brilliant,
Concrete. It won't fall now.
Yeah.
And they've heard the walls of the river, and there was jobs done further up the river to keep it from flooding and all that sort of thing.
So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear part 2 of the chat, where we hear all about the pirates on Dublin's coast and their connection to us culties.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.